So now we're live on Facebook and Instagram. Do you know what ADA is? So thanks so much for joining me. In less than 15 minutes, I'll be sharing with you why you should become familiar with a federal law called ADA if you are a small business owner. Please like and share this video if you get value from it. And if you're watching it on the replay, hashtag replay on the podcast, drop a like in there. Really appreciate your support. So I'm Dr. P and I'm a strategic business coach. I've been a school psychologist for about 10 years in K-12 schools in the U.S., served as a professor in online master's courses for school psychology, and also served on professional organization committees. So I really wanted to share about what ADA is and why you should become familiar with it if you are a small business owner. But listen up though, it might not seem as though this is something that's relevant for you, but I guarantee you it's still some information that you can walk away with to help you to be better at having an inclusive environment for your business. So throughout my training and practice as a school psychologist and a special ed administrator, and even as a part-time faculty, I really needed to become familiar with the federal laws, right? Especially the federal laws that impacted the day-to-day practice. I also became familiar with another set of laws when I was doing my doctoral program. So when I was able to combine all that information when I provide the delivery of services to support others, it is crucial because what we're doing, we need to be familiar with the federal laws that impact our day-to-day practices. And it really helps with compliance. It really does. It really helps with keeping us in compliance. And if you receive funding from various sources, this compliance could become a really important factor for you as well. So within the K-12 setting, at least here in the U.S., there are federal education laws that are specifically related to federal special education laws, and then there were also specific education laws as well. And these laws really impacted specific populations. So students with disabilities make up one of those specific populations, right? And when we're looking at how we deliver services to students with disabilities, there were two laws in particular that could come into play. One was the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the other one was Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And I'm really going to paint a picture of how you go from school to the world of work and why it's important to be familiar with ADA. Really, I'm going to get to that point. So with these two federal laws, right, students with disabilities you don't remain in your K-12 setting for the rest of your life, right? You do eventually leave your K-12 setting and become a worker. You become an employee in a business somewhere. Point is, you don't stay in K-12 for the rest of your life. So it was really important for me to share with staff members and with families and with the students themselves the importance of understanding their disability and what that meant for them, and how they can also continue to learn and grow and be aware of what they needed so that they could be successful. That was a big part of it. So I really used to have a lot of these conversations to help others to realize, okay, what did you need while you were in K-12 and what you're going to need once you graduate from high school. And let me tell you, it's not easy though, because it meant that we had to track what was working, what was not working, because sometimes we thought some things would work, then it didn't, but something else worked. But the point is that by the time the student is graduating, they become familiar with what works for them. But I can tell you this though, it doesn't stop there though, because once you go out into the world of work, you might learn about other strategies, other interventions that work even better for you. And that's part of the whole growth process. But the trick is you first have to become familiar with your own disability, your strengths, the things that are challenging for you, and then what you're going to need to continue with striving and hitting, your goals that you have for yourself. So through the K-12 settings, there were some accommodations and supports that were made available to students with disabilities under IDEA or ADA. But then after students graduate from K-12, after they graduated from high school, guess what? IDEA was not an applicable law because that law related to K-12 setting. However, once the student graduated, there's another federal law that came into play to help protect individuals with disabilities, and that is ADA. That is the one that I want to talk to you about today, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is a federal law that protects individuals with disabilities, after they graduate from K-12 settings. So if you are an individual with a disability, or you have a child, a niece, a nephew, or you know somebody who's currently in K-12 setting and they're looking at, what's going to be out there for me once I leave there, let them know about ADA if they haven't already learned about it. And my experience is oftentimes individuals, when they're in K-12, they're not really familiar with what happens outside of K-12. So ADA is a federal law that comes into play when you're in college and when you are in the work setting. So if you have a disability, please become familiar with the accommodations that can be beneficial for you so that you can do your day-to-day activities and you can continue striving and moving forward, right? Because once you know what works for you, you're going to be in a better position about making decisions that are related to like a work location or what floor of an office building you should be on, which service providers you're going to go with, which skills you need to continue building, which courses you can take, and so much more. And I'm just talking about you. If you have a disability and you are aware of the accommodations that can be beneficial for you, once you know of those accommodations, those can help impact those things I just mentioned. But that's just about you, right? But when you are also looking at growing your business, about having employees, because some of you might want to be solo entrepreneurs. Okay, that's fine. Some of you might have your heart set on growing your business so that your business can have more employees than just you. Maybe 10 employees, 15 employees, 50 employees. Wherever is your mission that you have for your business, if it does involve growing your employees, then definitely you want to listen up about the relevance for ADA. Yesterday I did cover Title 6 and 7 of the Civil Rights Act. Today I really wanted to talk about ADA because this is another law that we need to be familiar with. Because the Civil Rights Law, the two titles I covered yesterday, it really talked about the discrimination based on sex, gender, nationality, right? So you could check out that video on the Civil Rights Law that I talked about yesterday. Today, Americans with Disabilities Act, that is the one I want to be talking about. And with Americans with Disabilities Act, it is a civil rights law as well, and it prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public, right? So simply put, ADA was developed to ensure that individuals with disabilities were given the same opportunities and rights as individuals without disabilities. And ADA was signed into law in 1990, right? And then it was amended in 2009. A lot of federal laws do get amended. Why? Because it means that we are revisiting them and making sure they're still relevant and making sure we're making the necessary changes to make them appropriate and applicable to continue to protect the people that they were designed to protect, right? So yes, ADA was initially signed into law in 1990, but then it was amended in 2009. So when it was amended, there were significant changes that were made, and one such change related to the definition of disability. That was something that we became very familiar with when I was working in the schools, and because I've had that experience, I continue to remember and help out business owners when we're crossing that bridge and we're having that conversation, right? Of anything that relates to employment and especially relates to individuals with disabilities. So that definition of disability is one that we need to know as small business owners, which makes ADA one of the many federal laws that we do need to become familiar with when we are having employees. We really need to become familiar with this, with ADA. So that definition of disability, you ready for it? The definition of disability includes a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, a person who has a history or record of such impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. So that is what encompasses that definition of a disability, right? But just so you know though, ADA does not give you a specific list of the disabilities that are included in this definition. So you might be thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds very broad. But ADA does have some information in there to help support you in making sure that you are acting in compliance with ADA. So ADA guarantees that equal employment opportunities must exist for individuals with disabilities in public accommodations, employment, transportation, state and local government services, and in telecommunications. Telecommunications piece is really crucial if you have employees who have hearing and or speech impairments, right? So you must make sure that you are providing the necessary accommodations for them. I've worked in environments where we've had staff members who had hearing and or visual impairment. So when we had staff trainings, it was really important for me to make sure I met with this specific staff member who had a vision impairment and made sure I made available to her whatever was going to be projected on the screen, that she had it, and that she had a screen reader that could work with the presentation so she could follow along and be a part of the presentation. So it was just providing an accommodation to help her to be included in it. And she always thanked me for it because it helped her to really know what was happening. Because all too often she would tell me people would come in and do these presentations and never think about anybody other than someone who has vision, or so it made it really difficult for her to even feel a part of it. So that really meant a lot to me because I wanted to make sure she was included in there. And she and I had a conversation to learn about what worked and what didn't work. We went through a couple different technologies. There was one that we thought was going to work, but it really did not read the screen as we thought it was going to. And then we found one that worked for her. So she was always a part of the trainings that I conducted. So again, the telecommunications piece is included in ADA. So within ADA, there are 5 titles. And I'm not going to go through all 5 titles. I'm just going to touch on the one that is most relevant for us as small business owners. And that's Title 1. Title 1 focuses on the provision of access for individuals with disabilities to the same employment benefits and opportunities as individuals without disabilities. So Title 1 of ADA really relates to equal employment opportunities. When you look at job descriptions, or you even look at descriptions of different companies and businesses, you probably see something about equal employment employer, opportunity. This is where Title 1 comes into play. So if you're a small business and you are going to be having employees, then ADA Title 1 is one that you need to really become familiar with, right? Because Title 1 protects the rights of job seekers and current employees. And it specifically prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities in applying for jobs, hiring, firing, and job training. So employers can be private employers, state and local governments, employment agencies, and labor unions. So if you fall into one of those categories, then I highly recommend that you become familiar with ADA. But there's another part to it too. If you are a business with 15 or more employees, then you are required to comply with ADA and provide reasonable accommodations to a qualified applicant or employee. That is a part of ADA. So again, if you are a small business and you have 15 or more employees, you are required to comply with ADA. You are. But this don't mean that if you got less than 15 employees that you're not supposed to be making your environment inclusive. No, it doesn't. And I'm going to talk about that right at the end just before we wrap up. So if you're a business with 15 or more employees, you are required to comply with ADA and provide reasonable accommodations to qualify applicant or employee. So the law does include a definition of what a reasonable accommodation is. So a reasonable accommodation is a change that accommodates the employee's disability so that they can perform their job without causing the employer too much difficulty or expense. So in the law, it refers to that part about too much difficulty or expense as undue hardship. So in Title 1 of ADA, it does include guidelines to assist us as employers with understanding the reasonable accommodation process. And it also addresses the medical examinations that are required as part of the process, right? So again, if you are a small business and you have 15 or more employees, then you are required to comply with ADA. But, like I was mentioning a few minutes ago, just because you might have less than 15 employees, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be putting some effort in to have an inclusive environment. That's not what that means. Because if by chance you are a small business with less than 15 employees, what are your plans for having an inclusive environment that addresses the needs of your employees or applicants who have disabilities? That is a question I really encourage you to consider and come up with how you are going to approach that. Because remember, when we have diverse work environments, that can lead to higher levels of productivity and increased revenue, because it brings in, problem solving, a diverse problem solving. When we encounter problems, having employees from a wide range of areas does benefit, I should say, the organization. So just remember that. And when you are looking at your practices, remember you're aiming for inclusive practices. So take some time to review your federal laws and develop your inclusive practices for your business, because you want your business to survive not just the first 5 years, but you also want to make it survive 10 years and beyond, become a legacy for generations to come in your family, right? So hope this helps. Remember, solutions plus actions equals results. I'm Dr. Priscilla Kucer with Priscilla Kucer Consulting Solutions. Thank y'all so much for joining me. Bye.